Manscaped presents Out of the Park with Barry Davis. Also brought to you by our partners at Foundation Physiotherapy, Ballistic Sports, and Georgetown Honda.
This week, we chat with the man who's responsible for talking Mark Buehrle out of what would have been the biggest mistake of his life.
If you don't go out and try baseball tomorrow, if you quit now, you're going to be quitting on yourself the rest of your life. I said, Mom and I didn't raise quitters.
And now, here's a guy whose dad also tried to give him some great advice. He didn't follow it at all, and here he is, Barry Davis.
You see, I was going to say that, and now here's a guy who never had to worry about quitting anything because he never started anything.
Come on.
If you're going to insult me, at least give me a good insult.
I've seen the clips of you on a baseball diamond. I saw you giving it your all. You really tried, and that's actually what made it so hard to watch.
Yes. It will not be hard to watch this week's show, folks, because this is a jam-packed show. As Tom mentioned, we'll be talking to John Buehrle, the father of Mark Buehrle. We'll get an update as to what Mark is up to since retirement, and we're going to find out if we are any closer to actually landing the man himself, Mark Buehrle, on this show. The news is not all that discouraging, so that's good news. So we'll talk to Mark Buehrle. We're going to talk to an MLB player agent who is based here out of Canada. His name is Derek Marques. He represents a whole whack of young players, including at least a handful that have been drafted by the Toronto Blue Jays. We'll talk about what his role is as an agent, how it has changed throughout COVID, and we've got some really exciting news to tell you about that as well. We will also be drawing for 2 prizes from our friends at the Jaywalk. We have a prize for someone who is not an OTP insider, and we've got an even bigger prize for somebody who is an OTP insider. So we'll be making that draw on the show. But up next, Tom, we're going to be talking about, instead of a father, we're going to be talking about a mother, and we're also going to talk about why you and I are wearing these matching T-shirts if you were watching the program. There's Tom Forth. I'm Barry Davis. You're watching and listening to Out of the Park.
Play ball! Ladies and gentlemen, girls and boys, the first pitch with Barry Davis.
The first pitch is brought to you, Tom, by our brand new partners. We are really, really excited to have them on board. We're wearing the shirts. I've got the package in front of me right now. Manscaped. And you have seen Manscaped everywhere. They are advertising everywhere, and we're absolutely honored that they want to work with us. And I'm going to show you what this thing can do. Now, Tom and I just recently received our Manscaped 4.0. It's the lawnmower 4.0. You've used yours. Mine is still in the box here. And before we get into your actual use, we're not talking about some cheap box even. Like, this thing is unfreaking believable. This is a high-tech product in an incredibly high-tech box. So you got your razor, which, we'll get into in just a second. And then inside, you get yourself a little booklet here. And inside the booklet, you've got all these different, little tips on how to use your razor. You've got more tips right here. Inside, you've got all the different little grooming handles and stuff like that. Thomas, this thing is awesome. And with Father's Day coming up real soon, this will make a great gift, and we're going to tell you in a few minutes how you can get one of these at an incredible discounted price. But before, you use this thing, right?
I did, yes.
Dare I ask where on your body you use this?
Okay, yeah, you know what? It's a little bit risque, right? The Manscaped, their advertising is really based around your balls. And
Wait,
that's where
it's called
groin grooming, okay? Groin grooming.
Now, I am, I'm gonna just jump right over the whole. It's one of those risque things to talk about, because it isn't. It's one of those things that we should really be talking about an awful lot. And yeah, I used mine already, and I did because I've actually been grooming myself since about 15 or 20 years ago, when, lo and behold, Barry, people that watch us on the show know that I have really bad luck. I had a really bad accident on a snowboard hill, and I broke my tailbone.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. And from there, I had like 2 surgeries out of it, and grooming those areas of my body became really, really important. It's been something that I've had to do for, like almost 20 years. So, I have been one of those guys that just kind of used a clipper and had to be really careful and one little slip, one little shake, and you pay for it. Yeah, you pay for it dearly. This lawnmower is like one of the most amazing machines I have ever seen. I intentionally tried to cut myself. It did not happen.
Come on, you did not try to cut yourself.
Yes, I did. Yes, I did. They advertised that it's the no cut on the most sensitive areas, and guess what? I'm here to say, with a smile on my face, it works phenomenally. You don't have to take it all the way down to the deck. You can just shorten up the shrubbery, as it were. They've got beautiful little attachments for that, so you can take it down a little bit or an awful lot, whatever you want. The important thing is it's unbelievably easy to use, unbelievably easy to clean, unbelievably gentle on the whole. It was the easiest process, and I'm someone that's been doing this for 20 years. So guys out there, if you're not taking care of that area of your body, give it a spin. It will change your life. You will be a happier, cleaner feeling person all day long.
And we've got a great deal for you. And with Father's Day coming soon, if you have a hairy father, you may want to look at the Lawnmower 4.0 for Manscaped. And here is a great deal. And this deal is going to be around for at least 1 month. And it's up right now. So go to manscaped.com, and if you enter the promo code Out of the Park, OUTTATHEPARK, you'll receive 20% off plus free shipping with that code. Can't ask for a better deal for that. Right?
Nice. You know what? Hopefully we're going to have an awful lot of happy listeners and happy listeners' families as a result of this promotion.
Exactly. All right. Speaking of happy listeners and happy viewers, we want to also thank our friends at the Jaywalk, who have been partners with us for years. Obviously, because of COVID, we haven't been able to continue the type of promotions we've been doing with them. But Julie at the Jaywalk was on our show a few weeks ago and said, hey, I've got some swag I'd like to give away on your show. So we have 2 prizes. One is a Jaywalk shirt of your choice, which is going to go to someone who is not an OTP insider. And in a moment, you'll find out why it pays to be an OTP insider. But if you are not an OTP insider, you still have the opportunity to answer the question, which was named, I think it was 3 previous guests that we've had on Out of the Park since we've moved to Zoom. And we have a winner. So without further ado, our non-OTP member winner is...
It's Sam. Twitter handle at 00Sammy17 will be the proud and happy recipient of a Jaywalk shirt.
Sam, we will be contacting you via Twitter to let you know you have won. We'll get some information from you, which we'll pass to Julia at the Jaywalk. And at that time, they will send you your shirt. Now, the grand prize. And this goes to anyone who was an OTP insider who answered this question. We put all the names into a hat. We drew a name. And the name that we drew was, in fact,
an OTP insider since 2018. The winner's Kelly Cooper.
Kelly Cooper, congratulations. Kelly Cooper, we have not had you on one of our Zooms yet. Now we need to get you on wearing some of your new Jaywalk swag. So you have won an incredible prize pack from the Jaywalk. Once again, Kelly, I'll be in touch with you, and then I'll pass your information on to the Jaywalk, and you get to choose a bunch of really, really cool stuff. Okay, in just a minute, we're going to hear from MLB player agent Derek Marques, and he's going to tell us a lot about what is going on in the world of baseball and some of the young talent that is out there, and more or less the role of the agent in 2021. But, Tom, I've got some good news. He sent me a list of all of his clients, and there's at least a half a dozen of them that are Toronto Blue Jay prospects. And starting in 2 weeks, we're going to start having some of these kids on that are going to be future Toronto Blue Jays. We're also going to have some that are not Blue Jays, but are Canadian-born players that are with other organizations. So we're going to give you each week a little insight into the lives of some of the up-and-coming players that you may see in a Blue Jay uniform or in a Major League uniform down the line.
Super exciting. And you know what? It's baseball players in Canada have a tougher go in some ways than the States because we don't have that year-round program. And since COVID, it's been even harder. So it's going to be amazing to connect with these people and kind of hear about their journey and hear about how they're succeeding.
Well, Tom, each week on this show, you and I usually we talk to former ball players, or as you'll hear later in the show, a former ball player's dad. Well, now we're going to talk to somebody who has the responsibility of helping us get to know some of the new players in the game. He runs a company called Lake Ridge Sports Management. He is the head honcho. Derek Marques. Do I pronounce it Marques, your last name?
Marques, Marquez, Marks, however you want to pronounce it.
Okay, perfectly. Lake Ridge Sports Management, it's a full-service Canadian professional baseball agency. And first and foremost, for what you do, how difficult has it been over the last couple of years with COVID, with the limited amount of jobs that are available for young players? Because with each minor league system kind of being torn down over the last couple of years, I'm thinking that's going to kind of close the gap on the amount of jobs that are actually available for young players.
Yeah, so in regards to, how COVID's kind of hurt us or whatever, being in Canada, I've already been used to working remotely. So with that aspect, hasn't been too bad other than me not being able to go to spring training for the past 2 years. In regards to the contractment, I already had a lot of players in independent ball, so I've had a lot of connections there. So any player that wanted to play independent ball, I was able to get them on a roster, and then able to convince the players that they wanted to go to independent ball to realize that it is an opportunity to get back into an affiliate. I've already had 3 players this year sign from an independent ball back to affiliate.
Working with young players, and I'll put my cards on the table here. My 11-year-old son plays AAA ball, so we kind of live and breathe baseball, and this is a conversation I've been really interested to have, precisely because I get the opportunity to ask questions like this.
And you're looking for an agent for your son in about 4 years.
Well, see, there's the thing. I don't know what that looks like in Canada, and I know that how we do things in Canada is vastly different than a lot of the stories we hear from players that have come up through the States. So, for yourself as an agent for young players, what's the most important thing that you tell to your clients? Who should be looking for an agent? When should they be looking for an agent? And, what are the sorts of things that you do for players in Canada?
So if your son wants to play NCAA, let's just kind of make the wording correct. You'd be looking for an advisor, right? Because players can have advisors. They can't have agents, which makes them NCAA ineligible. And pretty much the biggest kind of written rule is it has to be a verbal agreement. There can't be a written contract, right? So if you have a written contract, even as an advisor, NCAA will deem that as an agent, right? So I do act as an advisor. I have 30 players for this year's draft. To answer your question, because I had a few of them in there, which players should look at having an advisor? I would say any player playing at that premium level, like Ontario Blue Jays, the Toronto Mets, anything at that regards. And, what we do for a player at that level is trying to find them the right school to go to first, get their education tied up just in case they don't get drafted, or give them an option, right? And I say this often, going to the best place to succeed. Do you go directly into a D1 program? Directly go to a JUCO program, right? And if you go to a JUCO program, junior college, going to the best junior college that will get them transferred into a D1 program. And I think that's one of the biggest mistakes that Canadian parents aren't aware of. They just hear of, oh, my son's going to school in the States, and they think it's a chance to get to the next level, but they're going to a D2 or a D3 school, which is pretty much you're playing college or Canadian university baseball just down south, paying a lot more money.
Derek, when you look at 20 years ago, if you were a Canadian ball player, you almost had to go down south to get your college education and hopefully get a scholarship and then get discovered and make it to the big leagues. Is it a little bit more plausible now for a young Canadian ball player to not leave Canada and still make it to the big leagues?
I think, even if you're playing within Canada, you do have to play against American players, because unknowingly, I will look at a Canadian player the same way probably a lot of American scouts do. How would this player do against American talent? right? So you need to go up against that to show that they can prove it, right? Because the depth of Canadian baseball isn't as deep. So they're going to already assume, oh, this guy's just doing well because he's playing in Canada and the talent isn't as good, right? So he needs to prove himself against those better players in the United States. And I would say, I don't know this for a fact, but it's probably the exact same thing in the United States with American hockey players, right? How would this player do in Canada, right? How would this player do in the OHL? Right? Or in minor midget in Toronto in the GTHL, right? And we look at that, I'm going to Ontario Blue Jays and watching the games, like how would this player perform if I'm watching a high school game in the States, right? Would this player still do well? And, is he hitting his zone? He's striking these guys out, but these are balls that are out of the zone that they're striking out, right? So I think you need to go down to the United States to just show that you can play at that level. And it's no difference than a college player playing at a smaller school playing against a Power 5 school, right? You need to show that you can play against the elite talent at that level, whatever you're playing in.
Is there a common, I guess I'd say bump in the road for players as they're going from high school to college, and in particular from Canada, maybe to the United States? Are there bumps or roadblocks that generally tend to happen that players have trouble with?
Not playing. That is definitely the number one bump, right? They're college, they're big fish in a small sea in high school. Doesn't matter if you're Canadian or American, and you get to these large programs and they don't play their freshman year. And then all of a sudden they're talking about going into the transfer portal, right? Well, this team scouted you or the school, recruited you to play, but they're not necessarily play as a freshman, right? So you need to kind of earn your bumps and get that and kind of go into it, with the mentality that you're not going to play as a freshman. Only those elite 10 out of 10 prospects have, a possibility of playing as a freshman. If you're even a 9.5 out of 10, chances are you're still going to ride the pine. So I think that's the biggest adjustment. Not only going miles away from home, right? Not being with any fans or friends or family, and then not playing, right? So, you just imagine when you went to university that first year in the freshman 15 and that adjustment, and you're only a couple hours away from home. Just imagine these young players doing that and going there just to play baseball, and you're not even doing that.
Wow.
You brought up the freshman 15. Is it common for young baseball players to gain that too, or is that something all the baseball keeps off of them?
It depends on the person, right? It's there's players that did gain a little extra weight. I had a player at university that, let's put it this way. I think he gained like the COVID 70, and he was more lined up like a linebacker when he showed up to school in September. So he really had to get his weight down with that. But like anything, it depends on the training level and, how self-aware and, how disciplined you are as an athlete.
Derek, has the role of an agent, I won't want to say changed, but maybe progressed over the years, whereas it's one thing to see talent in a player and see potential and try to get him the best possible contract. But is there also part of you that has to also prepare these young kids for what they're going to see in a world that we're in now, where money can come to you fast and the fame can happen to you fast? And with this day and age, you've got to be really careful about how you act in public. And we've seen it so many times. And even, you hear about this terrible Roberto Alomar incident. To avoid players getting into these types of troubles that maybe 30 years ago.
I think the biggest trouble we need to educate them is on social media. And that's the good thing about baseball is they're not overnight superstars, right? Like they are in the NHL, NBA, NFL, where the first round pick, all of a sudden everyone knows who you are, right? The first round pick in baseball will still ride every bus that the 40th round pick will, right? And that's kind of why I like, working with the baseball player, because you always have the ability to make it. But I think the social media aspect, I know a few years ago, where teams are really going through player social media. And there's a lot of players asking me, how do I just delete my social media? Just because they weren't sure if they deleted, if they tweeted a song lyric, that's good to be taken out of context. Right. And that's the biggest thing. And that's the thing too, that I kind of disagree with whenever these players, oh, this person tweeted this out in, 10 years ago, but it was a rap lyric, right? And that happened to Josh Allen before he got drafted by the Bills. And as a Bills fan, I would say thank you for every team that passed him, because he made that tweet, as a freshman in high school. But I think that's the biggest thing where it's like you just have to think twice. And even during the Black Lives Matter, I had a player in the Giants system and he wanted to post something, and he's African American. He sent it to me first, and I kind of looked it over. I said, this is great, but just take out the profanity, right? I think by taking out profanity, you just sound a lot more educated, and the message will come across. Where by leaving the profanity in it, I think people will not take your message as seriously. And he was beneficial enough to made it kind of go through me first, where there's other players that may not. But that was just my advice.
Foundation Physiotherapy presents The Medical Room.
And we are joined once again by our good pal Raj Suppiah from Foundation Physiotherapy. You have 3 locations plus your online opportunities for people to get themselves some physiotherapy. And how can they go about lining up one of the appointments to either come see you in person or virtually?
All the information is online, foundationphysio.com. All of our services, in person, virtually. We have the full gamut to keep you healthy and safe. So give us a shout.
Awesome. And, I pointed out this to you, Raj, just before we went on, that you're a good-looking, well-groomed man. And I think you would be a perfect owner for the Manscaped 4.0 lawnmower. See that? This is how we...
I just want to know how I'm that well-groomed, but we'll save that for another day. I'll jump in right here. The hair, the beard. He's always looking good every week. Just this part. We don't know what's going on. Party up top. Well, right? That's what Manscaped's for. We're going to help you with that.
Raj, speaking of looking good, well, the opposite of that happened with John Tavares in Game 1 of their Stanley Cup playoff series with Montreal Canadiens. And when you look at the hit, there was like 2 separate hits. When you look at that replay,
was it the second one that probably did the damage, or a combination of being hit twice? Raj, we saw him in the crowd or in one of the private boxes watching Game 5. And, I know a guy I work with suffered a concussion recently, and he spent at least 2 weeks not being able to even see light. The fact that he was sitting in a well-lit arena with noise and lights and everything going on, can we take that as a good sign?
Yes. He's come off that initial rest protocol, which is great. So I see it as a good sign that he's able to kind of handle that stress. But again, remember, now he's getting what we call like that external stimulus with the noise and the light, but he doesn't have that physical stimulus. He's not required to skate and handle the puck at the state. So when we combine the two together, that's where we can see, will those two work together? And plus there's the pressure too, right? The pressure also adds what we call a cognitive stress, which is a mental stress to perform. He didn't have that stress with him yesterday. So, he might have it from a different perspective, but being the captain of the team, that stress is on you as well. And stress can totally be a large part of, how quickly you recover from a concussion.
With hockey, obviously one of the big things is physical hits. And so he's not going to just be able to come back to the game and DH like a baseball player would be. He doesn't have a hockey player doesn't have the option. They have to go out there. They have to get hit. Is that going to make the recovery much slower than, say, a baseball player?
100% I think so, probably because of the impact that's possible that could happen in the sport. And that's why I think if Tavares does return, my opinion is the Leafs would have to be pretty deep in the playoffs for Tavares to return. And at that point, he's probably returning on limited controlled minutes because they want to limit his ability, right? It also, the NHLPA has strong contracts about this, that, the player's health comes first, especially in a concussion. So, hopefully the Leafs go deep and we get to see him come back, but it's probably also going to be on restricted minutes.
Well, Raj, normally I would make some kind of a smart-ass joke right here, but because we are talking about something so serious, instead of saying a smart-ass joke, I'm just going to remind you, the promo code Out of the Park, manscaped.com is where you go to get one of these beautiful things. And we'll give you one more chance to plug Foundation Physiotherapy website, Instagram. Where can people go?
At Foundation Physio on Instagram and foundationphysio.com. Check us out. We're happy to help you.
All right. You got a good head on your shoulders, and I want to see that head shaved next time we talk.
Which head?
This is where we say goodbye. We are joined now by, I call you the king of all baseball dads, and that is Mr. John Buehrle. And first of all, John, thank you so much for being the voice and the face for your son. God love Mark, just not a me guy. We've been trying to get him to do something like this for you. Have you come any closer at all, especially after the Hall of Fame announcement?
That maybe he would consider doing something like this.
On a scale of 1 to 10, before it was 0, it's probably at least a 1, maybe a 2 now. So it is getting there.
I like that. So you're saying there's a chance.
There's always a chance. There's always a chance, yeah.
Has Mark always been, like, I always found, like, we could just talk away from the cameras, away from everything, and we'd have just incredible conversations. But when that camera's on him, he's quiet. Has that always been Mark's way?
Yes, Mark, he's always been like that. To get him started, as you well know, to get him started on an interview is like pulling teeth. But once you get him going, he's fine. It's just the first 15 seconds, 30 seconds of any interview, he just flat hates it. But once you get him going, you can't shut him up. He really likes it. So
now you've asked, have you ever said to him, okay, Mark, I know you don't like doing these things, but this is Barry, for goodness sakes.
I have said something along that line.
I don't know if I want to know how he responded.
Well, you haven't got the interview yet, have you? So, I have said something like that to him. And he's, yeah, I know. And just like, I think, you remember the conversation, kind of a private conversation you and I had a few years ago about there's only, so many announcers that, I cotton to, Mm-hmm. And Mark's kind of the same way. And you are in that group. Now, none of them, except with maybe the exception of Hawk, was right up on the top. But you're in that group, so I wouldn't give up.
All right, I am honored. Tom. This is good news.
Yeah, when we're looking back, at Mark's career, is there maybe an interview or a moment in front of the cameras, maybe early on in his career, that pops into your head when you see him not wanting to do it later as maybe the source of his reluctance?
You mean like bad press?
Really bad? Yeah. Was there an interview that went really bad back in the day?
There wasn't an interview that went bad with him. There was an interview that went bad with my wife. When we were in, in fact, we were in Toronto, and it was one of the first games. I know it was in the first year. One of the first games that Mark had pitched. A local reporter, broadcast journalist, if you will, came up and asked a number of questions. And my wife, she's that's where Mark gets it from, because he is very much like Pat. She just doesn't want to do the interviews. and he had interviewed her, and I was there. And some of the things that Pat said, he took and turned totally around. One of the things was, Mark was on the road. It was, gosh, I can't remember, it was her birthday in August or Mother's Day. It was one of those, something like along that line there. And Mark he just couldn't get to a phone, excuse me, and call. Well, the reporter said something or asked Pat something. Well, you heard from Mark today? She said, no, he's on the road. He'll probably call me later tonight, which he did call that night. I think he was flying from Toronto to LA or Texas. I'm not really sure where, but he was on the road. And rather than broadcasting that, he wrote it up as though, Mark Buehrle refused or didn't have time for his mom on Mother's Day or on her birthday or something like that. And it was printed, and she was so visibly upset. She was crying. I was so mad. If I could have got the guy, I would have wrung his neck. And I still may have ever seen him. But from that point on, she's never given another interview. And I'll be very careful. There's only a few that I'll speak to, and Barry's one of them, which he knows because he and I've had this conversation years ago. But there's not many that we'll speak to, and I think it's one of those reasons. Right there is, and Mark, he's never had bad press, but there's always been guys that want to just sensationalize on, he downplays everything. Mark, he just, they threw his perfect game. I just want to go home. I'm going to go home and have some pizza or something like that. He wasn't looking off for all the pomp and circumstance that goes along with it. He just wanted to get out of there. But guys they just won't, they won't let him alone, and they sensationalize on the negative. So.
There was a time when I was on the Blue Jays broadcast during a game, and I went into the stands and did a little interview with you during the broadcast. And I went back down to the camera bay, and in between innings, when the Jays were batting, Mark actually came out into the camera bay, and he goes, "What were you doing talking to my dad?" I said, "How do you know that?" He goes, "Because I was watching it while I was in the clubhouse between innings." I said, "Well, you didn't like that?" He goes, and he just kind of gave me that little wink. He goes, "You stay away from my dad." And then he goes out that inning, and I think he walked 2 or 3. And he comes back out after. He goes, "You see what you did?"
Well, if it makes you feel better, Barry, of all the stations that he could have been watching, he was watching you.
Yeah, I'll take that as a compliment.
There you go. See? So he's watching. He hones in on you. He knows.
Yes.
John, there have been, at this point, I think, 6, 7, 8 no-hitters already thrown this year. And they're becoming pretty much commonplace now. But when Mark threw his perfect game, it was a huge deal, and it's still a huge deal because perfect games are even rarer than a no-hitter. What do you remember about? Were you and Pat at the game? Did you watch it on TV? Like, what do you remember about that day?
I was headed up to Mark's farm that day, and I was going to go up there and watch the game. We were here in Missouri. I was going to go up and watch the game up there, and Pat was here. And on my way up, she, I guess right after I got there, she called me. The reception up there was real bad. For some reason, I just couldn't pull the station in to save my soul. I was trying to, get it on TV, and I was just getting reports from Pat. And she says, "Well, Mark's doing really well. It's the 6th inning. He's 0-0 and all that. And 7th inning, Mark's got a what going, and next thing
is that Pat sneaking over your shoulder?"
Yeah, got back from the show. That's the thing I remember most about that perfect game, is that I couldn't tune in. Here's the game of his life, and I'm sitting there with a bunch of egg and scrambled garbage on the TV. Oh my God, I think I had a pacemaker at the time. It was going overtime, keep my heart going straight. It's just like, wow. But that's the thing I remember most about his perfect game.
How many of his games did you watch? Because, most parents, they kind of stop watching their kids do stuff once they're done high school. But when you have a child going to professional sports, you're watching right up until their 40s, hanging on every pitch. How often did you watch his games? Were you watching every game he went out there?
We watched every game. If we weren't at the game that he was pitching, we were watching it on TV, if we could get it. We had the MLB package, everything we get, and there might have been 2 or 3 games in the entire of his career that we couldn't get, that they just weren't broadcasting. If he wasn't pitching that particular game, we would still watch the game if we weren't doing something else, but there were times we had things to do. We just went ahead and go since he wasn't pitching, but we knew ahead of time, when he was going to be pitching. So we watched just about every game. I'll say we watched every game that he pitched, from, well, his first outing in Minnesota to his last one. Yeah.
So who's having a harder time with the retirement, Mark or you and Pat?
Pat and I.
Yeah.
Mark. Yeah. Well, Mark misses the guys. He really does. He misses the guys tremendously. He stays in contact with them, especially the guys he met early on in his career. John Garland and Paul Konerko and them, and just all the players in general. Even the one year he was in Miami, he made some good friends down there and in Toronto. But it's just he misses the guys. He doesn't miss like he said numerous times. One thing in particular he doesn't miss at all is the guy coming through and telling him, the travel agent coming through and saying, okay, you got to be downstairs at 6:30 in the morning, catch the bus, or you got to be here at a certain time. You got to be here. He doesn't miss that at all. But as far as he misses the game, but not playing it so much.
He had quite atypical stuff. Someone that was such a successful starting pitcher. And for the lion's share of his career, he wasn't going out there throwing 97, 98 miles an hour. But, I've got a son that's a young pitcher. And, you see funny things when you're watching other teams play, and you can always tell the pitchers' dads, because they're the ones that are pacing out behind the field, or, they can't sit still. Were you one of those dads that was pacing? Did you have your routine or your good luck that went in line with Mark when he threw? And number two, when did you know he had something really special going?
Well, the first question, I can probably count in the 16 years that he played baseball. I can probably count the number of times in one hand that I actually sat in the seat when he was on the mound. I could not sit there and watch whether he was winning or losing. I couldn't do it. There was something. I was just so nervous. So I'd be walking all around the field. I got to know those parks pretty good. The back alleys, not the alleys, but the concourses. I got to know all those places pretty well because I walked it all the time. So yeah, I couldn't sit in the seat and watch him. And it was murder when he had the suite in Chicago, because you almost required to stay there. It was nice, but like still, if he's out there pitching, I can still get out and go away, but I had to go back there. But as far as knowing when Mark was going to be something, when he was, and I don't remember exactly, but and I'm not joking here. So when he was something like 18 months, 2 years old, we would take him with our other children. We go to these little school carnivals, and they'd have these poster boards with a picture of a bunny or a clown. You throw a couple bean bags through the mouth, get a toy, that sort of thing. Well, more often than not, Pat and I, we were asked to leave because we had so many stuffed animals and toys and everything. Mark was up there, just a little, 2-year-old kid, just chucking them through those holes. And we were just winning things left and right, whatever they had. So we kind of knew then that I suspected that, anything could always change. Well, maybe it's just a quirk. But as he grew up, as he was growing, he just seemed to improve every year. I mean, he had the control was there. He was just so accurate. You stated it right. He never had speed, but he had the accuracy and he had the finesse. He could make that ball dance and do what he wanted to do. And when he got to play Little League, we were having teams from, at the time we were right here in the St. Louis area. We were having teams as far away as 30 and 40 miles over into Illinois, coming over here and trying to draft him. I don't know if draft is the right word, to play on their team over there, because he was that good. And he was like that his entire little league career, and then even going into high school, except the first 2 years. That's a story in itself. He got cut his first 2 years in school. He was the coach told him, said, if you wanted to play if you want to ever play sports, you better find something besides baseball because you'll never make it there. That's kind of backfired on him time and time again. But he got cut his freshman and sophomore year, and no one could understand why, because he was just so good. He was the year that the White Sox won the World Series. They came out with Wheaties boxes with marked picture on them, and they had it was kind of like I don't know if they have it up here in Toronto, I can't remember, but the White Sox call it Sox Fest, winter warm up here in St. Louis.
Jays Fest, Winter Fest,
okay. Okay. They had in the St. Louis area during the winter warm up for the Cardinals, St. Charles County, where we live here in Missouri, the Greater Sports Authority had a very similar situation. They maybe had 100, 150 people in a lunch. And as centerpieces on all the tables was a box of Wheaties, which was given out a little bit later on, So Mark, high school coach, the one he cut, or the one that cut Mark, was invited. Jeez. And this guy's 4 foot nothing standing up to begin with, a little short guy. There was questions after we ate. There was questions and answers. Kids come up to the microphone, and somebody came up and said, "I understand that I can't remember exactly how the question was, but something to the effect of, why didn't you play all 4 years in high school?" And everybody knew who this coach was. So, and say there's 100 some odd people in this room, 150 people, and everybody just kind of stands up and looks over towards this guy. And Mark says, "Well, if I wouldn't have been cut my freshman and sophomore year," he raises his voice, and this guy starts, just like the Wizard of Oz, when she starts melting, when Dorothy pulls the water, this guy just sits there, just starts sliding down his chair like he was so embarrassed. But people, but it was just, it was one of those things that he just, we found out it was a mistake a couple of years later, but.
Was there someone that you saw that had an overwhelming influence on Mark that helped him get sort of over the mound or successful as a professional player? Someone that took him under their wing?
When Mark was, and I don't know how old exactly, he was 10, 11 years old, something like that. John Denny, who used to be a pitcher for the Cardinals, had a baseball camp. I think he still has it down in South St. Louis. And it's during the fall of the year. And gosh, I think it was like a 6-week thing on Saturday morning. He had a lot of coaches down there, some Cardinal players, just some just dads, but they would help. They'd have one section of the park to kids how to field. Kids are trying out as catchers, how to throw a guy out second, how to bat, how to do this, how to do that. And John Denny was down there, and he noticed how everybody was throwing in the batting or the pitching cage there, and he noticed how well Mark was doing, and he just watched him for a long time. And then I guess the second or third week we were there, he came up to my wife and I and told us, he said, "I've been watching Mark for a couple of weeks. I was wanting to make sure it wasn't a quirk, just a good day versus bad day sort of thing, but he was consistently good." And John Denny said, he's really got some promise out there. Said, "I'd like to, if you don't mind, your permission, I'd like to take him under my wing and take him personally and give him all the points that I can to help him out." Like, duh, yeah, go for it, So he took him under his wing, and for the rest of the 6 weeks or 4 weeks, whatever was down there, he helped him develop. I think Mark only had 2 pitches, maybe a curve and a slider, maybe. I can't remember for sure what. I know a curve was one. But John helped him develop some of the other pitches, how to hold the ball. He said, do this and do that. And he just, to this day, it's just, it wouldn't have been for that, us taking him down to that camp, that baseball camp. Who knows?
John, before Mark was even born, how big of a role did baseball play in your life? Were you just a fan? Did you play it? Was there any kind of talent from you?
I played Little League baseball all the way up until I could no longer, like Jethro Bodine. I couldn't fit in the uniforms anymore, and they knew I was too big to play there. But I love the game. I played the ball. I was not bragging. I think maybe a little better than a few other guys. I love the guy. I played shortstop and second base, and I really did like the game. Mark loves all sports. Any you name it, he plays it. But baseball was his forte. There's numerous times you see him sitting in a dugout when he wasn't pitching. You have a set of headphones on, and there were times he had two. He'd be listening to a hockey game in one set of headphones, and maybe a baseball game, one of the other teams playing someplace. But then watching the game he was at. So he was always tuned into sports there.
Was it a constant thing? Like even when he left the ball game, was he always listening to something, always checking out something?
Yeah, he had all his radio and his vehicles are all tuned to all the sports networks. It wasn't until after he got out of the game, I guess, where you actually learned they actually played music on the radios. It was just talk all the time. But yeah, he was always listening. He liked the post game show quite a bit because people would call in and talk. Most of them are really nice and helpful. You get a jerk every once in a while, but they'd call in and say, "Boy, it's too bad this happened or that happened," and Mark would pick up on these little problems that they had throughout the field that the fans saw and Mark didn't see from his perspective on the field. So that helped Mark maybe the next time he went out or next time he faced that team, when they bring things up like that. So
That's fascinating because professional athletes will always tell you, I don't read the newspaper, I don't watch the news, I stay away from any of that stuff. And I've always known that that's, for the most part, they're lying. They all read about what's going on with them. They want to know what other people are saying. It's just human nature. But that Mark would actually, take what people were saying and actually use that as something to make them better. I think that's pretty cool.
oh yeah, and the one thing he's told so many people and so many times in interviews was, and I've heard the announcers ask before, well, how did you feel when you gave up that play? You could have struck the guy out and you threw the same pitch and hit a home run or something like that. Mark said, "Hey, I can't take it back. This guy got a home run. I'll know next time not to throw him that pitch." So he took anything, just about everything that was a negative, if you will, and try to turn it into a positive. So yeah, he would listen to it all the time. He wouldn't go out of his way to. And I never ever saw him go pick up a magazine or a newspaper the day after he pitched just to see what they would read. He didn't have to, he didn't want to, but because people would call him and say, "Mark, I read this article, blah blah blah," and if he wanted to, he could have Googled it, and got it. But yeah, he took what they said to heart quite a bit, what the fans said.
When they made the announcement a few months back that Mark was on the Hall of Fame ballot, what did the news mean to Mark and what did it mean to you and Pat? Because I'm thinking it meant something different to you and Pat than it would have for Mark.
Well, I know Mark was really surprised. I think everybody was surprised to an extent that we didn't think it would come this soon. For some reason, I was thinking, and I don't know why I'm thinking it, but I was thinking that generally it's like 5 or 6 years, 7 years of a player's out before they're really accepted by the Hall of Fame. And I don't know why I think that, but so with him being mentioned this year, just really surprised me. He was happy. He didn't expect to get many votes. I didn't know how the balloting went. I know they're voted on, but I didn't know, percentage wise how that all mattered. And when I saw where Mark was in line with some of the other candidates, for the Hall of Fame, I was floored, because I thought for sure. I mean, you look at some of these names, they're icons in baseball, I mean, rightfully so. And Mark was above them a little bit. That could change next year too. Mark may fall way behind and may not get any votes. I don't know, but as a parent, Pat and I, anytime your child does something that's awesome, that's really good, a sense of accomplishment as a parent, you can't be more proud of them. Um, and I didn't think it was possible to be able to be more proud of Mark than what I already was. And that's just icing on the cake. It was just, I mean, I don't know what else he could do other than the Hall of Fame. That pretty well wraps it all up.
He was a special player. He was a pitcher that, there aren't many like him in the game nowadays at all.
Right.
And whether or not that's a good thing or a bad thing is still subject to debate. I think here on Out of the Park, we like seeing those pitchers go on the distance. We like seeing those 200 innings a year.
Right.
But he's made it to the top of the hill. And I'm going to throw an unfair question out at you. If you had to peg down one thing about Mark that made him as successful as he was, what would it be?
I tell a story, true story. When Mark got cut his freshman, sophomore year in high school, his junior year, they always had tryouts in February and last February, first part of March, somewhere in that area. And we always knew, because Mark would come home and tell us, okay, 3 weeks from now, they're going to have the first tryouts, or he was always keeping us, abreast of what was going on. And this particular year, his junior year, he wasn't saying anything. And it was, I finally, something just wasn't sitting right with me, So I asked him one day, I said, hey, when's tryouts? So I think 2 weeks from tomorrow or something like that. I said, okay, that's cool. So 2 weeks went by and didn't say anything. And I thought about it again, said, what's tryouts? It starts tomorrow night. Oh, okay. I mean, I just misunderstood you. That he's always really so evasive about it. He just didn't want to, fess up and talk about it. So finally, he just kept putting it off to tell me when it was. So I called the coach. I called school, talked to the coach. I said, Bob, this is the one that cut him his freshman, sophomore year. I asked him, I said, Bob, when's tryouts? He said, oh man, we've been having tryouts for like the past week and a half or 2 weeks or something like that. And he said, tomorrow night's the last night for it. I said, Mark been there? He said, no, I was wondering if he was going to try or out or what. Okay. All right. Well, I appreciate that. So I went and told my wife, and we waited for Mark to come home that night. We sit around the dinner table and we had our dinner, and we always had a kind of a unwritten rule that as soon as the kids were done with dinner, they go and do their homework and get it done if they hadn't already done it before dinner. So Mark said he had just one report or something like that to do, so he went and started his report. So about an hour after we got done eating, he told Pat, I'm gonna go and talk to him, find out what's going on. So I went in his room and asked him, say, hey, bud, what's going on? He said, no, not much. We just kind of talked about things. I said, hear any more about tryouts? When's tryouts? I thought I'll check tomorrow and find out. I said, Mark, I looked at him and said, stop. You were writing things down. This is before he had a computer. He was actually writing things down. I said, look at me, buddy. He looked at me and said, I called school today and talked to coach. And you talk about deer in the headlight look. I mean, he was just like, oh man, I'm busted. I'm dead now. So I said, what's up? And he said, well, Dad, I tell you what. I said, the past 2 years, getting cut, it hurt. It hurt really bad. And I said, I've never told you how bad it hurt. He said, but the denial and the rejection, I can't handle it a third time. I said, I'll tell you what, son. I said, you take all these denials that you get. I said, you're never gonna, your entire life, nothing's ever gonna be 100%. You're always gonna have denials. You're always gonna have rejections. You take those, turn them into positives. See if that doesn't help you out. I said, you're never, ever going to get ahead. So if you quit now, if you don't go out to try baseball tomorrow, if you quit now, you're going to be quitting on yourself the rest of your life. I said, Mom and I didn't raise quitters. I turned and said, the rest is up to you, ball's in your court. So I turned and walked out the door, and he didn't say anything the rest of the night. He came out and said, good night later on. And we talked breakfast the next morning like nothing ever happens. And I didn't know what to expect. I went to work. I was so nervous when I was at work. I had to take off a little early, come home, because it was his last night of practice, and I didn't know what was going to happen. So I came home, and I was pacing just like I did at the field. And sure enough, he got home. He generally got home by 3:45, 4 o'clock, something like that. And it got to be 4:15, got to be 4:30, but finally by 4:45, he come tooling in the driveway. And I'm just like, gosh, I meet him at the door. My stomach said, I'm gonna throw up. I can't handle this. It's just terrible. So I was sitting in my chair and he came in the door and I said, hey, bud, what's going on? He said, he had a real long look on his face. And so what happens? He just kind of looked down the floor and didn't say anything for a second. I said, oh man. He looked up at me and says, Dad. I said, yeah. I made the team. So he started jumping up and down. I started crying. Pat started crying. It was just that was probably the most defining time in all of Mark's career, as far as anything we've had to do with him, was my talk with him that night. I always tell people, it was like, saying, win one for the Gipper, if you will. Because I think if I wouldn't have talked to him, I really don't think that he would have gone out and tried out that third night or that last night. But because I told him, we never raise quitters, man. If you quit now, you're gonna be quitting yourself the rest of your life. You're never going to get ahead.
And that is one of the biggest challenges of any parent, right? Because you want to encourage, but you don't want to push so far that they back off. And you had the exact right balance. Many have made the mistakes with their kids, and I kind of guilty of that when it came to my son and learning music. He was backing away, and I wanted to encourage, but I think I went a little bit too far, and it ended up turning him off. But I mean, my goodness, if it weren't for that conversation, we wouldn't be sitting here chatting with you about your son as we are right now.
Well, and Barry, Mark has said that. Mark has made that comment in interviews numerous times, that he said, that Dad and I said, I wouldn't be, when he's talking to reporters after a game, he says, there's a good chance I wouldn't be sitting here right now talking to you if Dad hadn't taken the time and talked to me. We always made it a point, within reason, of never telling our kids what to do. We always try to present options to them and let them make their own decision, again, within reason. And that was one of the things, like you were saying with your son in music, I didn't want to push him if he really, truly didn't want to play. I knew he did, but he just had to get it, convince himself. And I guess, it was just the right tune or tone of the way I presented it to him, that and I had to contribute some of that to my job, because I worked for the city down here, and I was involved in negotiations with the laborers, unions. So I had to do some talking once in a while to get our city side across. But and I took some of that into this conversation with Mark. So it all worked out though.
John, each and every week here on Out of the Park, we invite a few of our viewers and listeners to join in on the conversation. So we've got a few of them that we've invited in, and one by one they're going to come in, and we will get them to each have a chance to ask you a question. And let's begin today. By the way, everyone, say hello to Mr. John Buehrle.
Hi, Mr. Buehrle.
Hi, please, John.
Let's begin with Fiona. Fiona, say hello to John.
Hi, John. How are you?
I'm doing well, yourself?
I'm good, thank you.
Good.
Obviously, there's lots of things that Mark did in his baseball career that made you very proud. But is there anything you can share with us that's off the field, away from baseball, that makes you proud about him?
Oh gosh, so there's a number of things. The way that he's raised his children, and I'm a little partial, because Mark has raised his two children, Braden and Brooklyn, pretty closely to the way that we raised our children. And the finest form of flattery is repetition and doing what someone else has done. So he's raised his children just right, and just like he's taught them manners, yes ma'am, no ma'am, and things of that nature. And Yeah, that's probably one of the bigger ones. I mean, there's a number of things, but that's probably one of the biggest ones. Raises children.
Thank you.
Great question, Fiona. Thank you so much. So, and that's an interesting thing too. His siblings. How did Mark get on with his siblings, especially as he was starting to succeed in such a high profile position that he had as a Major League Baseball player?
They were to them. He was Mark. He just happened to be on TV wearing a uniform. That's all there was to it. There was never once in all the years he played that I ever even remotely think any type of animosity, any jealousy, anything of that nature. They were proud of him. Hey, that's my daughter called him Bubby. There's my Bubby out there, and yeah, they were just, when he come home, they'd sit there and they'd mess around, wrestle around, and go out hunting and fishing together, just like brothers and sisters do. It's just, there was nothing really out of the ordinary with the relationship. It was just a brother sister relationship, and he wasn't here during the summertime as much as normal, but he made up for it, being with them and things when he came home off season.
That's awesome. Fiona, again, thank you so much for your question. Sue, say hello to John. Not the other John, but John Buehrle. We had two Johns here.
Hi, John. Thank you for doing it. It's nice to meet you.
My pleasure.
I was a great fan of your son and his pitching, especially the speed he pitched. And I find myself, when I watch baseball, comparing pitchers that take so long. And I just wondered what your opinion is, and maybe even Mark's, about this idea of a pitch clock. I've seen it in minor leagues, and I love it. And I just wonder your opinion about pitch clocks.
Well, Mark was just interviewed by Frank Thomas just this past week, or it was broadcast this past week. I'm not sure when the interview was done. And one of the questions that Frank Thomas asked Mark was along that same line about the time taken in between pitches. Mm-hmm. And as you know, Mark, I think Mark held the record. Still holds the record for the I keep 6 seconds or 7 seconds or something like that in between pitches. And he repeatedly will say something about he just doesn't understand why when the guy gets the ball, he has to walk around the mound, just pick up the rosin bag. That's a pet peeve of his. He does not like it. He is a big proponent of the clock. If he had anything to do with it, he'd be using it right now.
Oh, good. I agree. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much.
No problem.
Thank you very much, Sue. Tom, you want to jump in here?
Yeah, we just had kind of the antithesis of Mark Buehrle in terms of pitching approach a few weeks back on the show, Jason Fraser, who was known for taking, an unbelievable amount of time between pitches. But the question I've got actually is Mark like that with everything he does? Is he that fast eating dinner? If he golfs, is he that fast on the tee? Does he just like rip through life?
He'll take his time when it requires it, i.e. hunting. It's one thing you can't rush. He'll go out, he'll take his time out, he's out in the woods. He's fallen into my footsteps as far as I do a lot of woodworking, and he's now doing that as well. He's building a lot of things, and he learned just about like the second project he started that you can't go fast, because once you cut something, it's got to be right. And he learned real quick that you got to measure twice, cut once, that sort of thing. So he's learning, but no, he's not impetuous whatsoever. Baseball was just that thing. He said all the way from day one that he felt that's the way baseball should be played. He never understood why it should take 3 hours or 3.5 hours for a game. One of the fastest games on record is Mark's, and when he played in Seattle, it was less than 2 hours, like an hour and 58 minutes or something like that. And they said that the vendors in Seattle lost something like $150,000 in sales. They had all these hot dogs and bags and tons of popcorn and all tacos, everything all fixed, and it was no good. They had to get rid of it. One guy said he didn't have a chance to get his beer cold yet. So that that was a funny thing that happened there. But he just never understood why that takes so much time, Todd.
And it's funny because we've talked to many catchers that have caught Mark, and they always say he would never shake off. We would tell him what to throw, and he would throw it. So, like when it was dinner time, and you'd say, "So, Mark, do you want pizza or chicken tonight?" Would he just say, "You tell me, and I'll eat it"?
Unless he has something very specific in mind, he just whatever. Just he goes with the flow. He goes with the flow. Yeah. I think Mark. Yeah, you're right. Mark never. He never in all the years he played. He never shook one sign off from the catcher.
That's fantastic. That's fantastic. We have one more question, and John, meet John.
Hey,
Hi,
John. How are you?
I'm
John,
doing well.
I just want to make a comment. Everything you've talked about in the way of your parenting has been so positive and encouraging. And I can see that your kids would follow you as an example because you're a great example.
Well,
you don't push, you accept, you let them be them, you let them be yourselves. So congratulations for that.
Well, I appreciate that. Thank you.
I got to tell you, I laughed and laughed last night because I pulled up the video of Mark on the tarp in the rain delay, going back and forth and back. I must have watched it 20 times and laughed.
Yeah.
What a big kid. I loved it. I loved it.
Well, there's a story about that. Kenny Williams, who's GM of the White Sox, and this is right after Mark signed his big contract. Kenny Williams told Mark, said, "Mark, if you go out and slide on the tarp again, I'm going to fine you $5,000." And I can understand Kenny's point. I mean, he had a lot of money wrapped up in Mark, and Mark go out there and slip and fall, something happened and break his arm, boom, it's over with. And Mark said he wanted so badly to take $5,001 bills and put them in a baggie, run out across the tarp and slap it down on second base and turn around. Told Kenny, said, "There it is, go get it." He never had the opportunity to do it, but he wanted to do that so bad.
John, can I ask you one more thing? I'm sorry, Barry. Is it okay if I ask you one more thing?
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah.
So on June 24th, 2017, it's retirement of Mark Buehrle's number in Chicago.
Right.
And Brooklyn throws the first pitch to him. He's behind home plate.
Mm-hmm.
And then Brandon goes out and he sings the national anthem.
Whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts. Now, I suspect that all the buttons on your shirt would have popped off because you were so proud. What was that day like?
It was. I wore polo shorts, so I wouldn't have to bust all my buttons off. It was a day that it was unbelievable. About 2 weeks before that, in just East St. Louis, right across the river from St. Louis, the Gateway Grizzlies is a minor league baseball team playing a game, and they had Braden come over and sing the national anthem, and there was only a couple hundred people there. But just to see if he was going to be able to do it without, breaking his voice or, being embarrassed or something like getting nervous, he was just like singing in the shower, he really handled it. So when we get to Chicago, with the 45,000 or whatever it was, it's like, gosh, how's this going to work? And he nailed it, buddy. I mean, he was I couldn't have been more proud of him. And Brooklyn too, that Braden is just, he's one of a kind. That's my buddy, my fishing buddy.
Does he still sing? I mean, Tom and I are musicians here, so we're really into this part of it.
I tell you what, he does, Barry. He sings and he plays the piano / organ, and he's learning the violin right now.
Oh, that's awesome.
And he has a voice that was he's made, I won't say CDs. He has a couple of CDs that he's made, but just more family, as in mass production or anything like that. But he's a couple Christmas songs, other songs that he's been singing, and to hear him sing good Lord. I mean, it gives me shivers. It really does. But yeah, he's turned out to be quite the musician and singer, I guess you call him. Yeah.
That's
Yeah,
fantastic.
really. Yeah.
One last thing I want to ask you about, Mark, before we wrap this up. And having talked to people that were teammates of his, and you think of Marcus Stroman's name comes to mind right away, and how, Marcus called him Papa Bear and really looked up to Mark in that way. I've heard players and even the clubbies talk about how generous Mark was. He would make sure that he took care of the people that took care of him during the season. When you see that, does that outweigh any of the things that he did as a pitcher, just to know the impact that he left on young players, the fact that he was generous not only with his time but with his money? He was just one of those guys that are just such a rare breed these days, beyond the baseball talent.
Well, he was as genuine as in his away from the field, out of the public view, as you would see him, in the spotlight. There was times that Mark did some things that was just unbelievably just so humiliating. I mean, I didn't mean that humiliating. I was so humble.
Yes.
Seeing what he was doing, just because he could. One of the games, the things that just kind of give you and this wasn't the only time, but the one particular time in Chicago, there was a gentleman that he knew that owned a restaurant in the greater Chicago area. And it was more of a kid's, theme type restaurant. And this guy is him and his wife and mom and dad and a few of his kids. And whenever we would go there after a game, this guy, he always made sure that no one came up and bothered him as far as getting interviews or pestered him. Every once in a while somebody, squeezed through. And Mark didn't mind that, but he just didn't want to be inundated while we were trying to eat. So this guy really kind of took care of Mark. Well, one day they found Mark talked to this guy. He said, "How come you never ask, for interviews and that, or sign autographs?" And well, you come here to get away from things like that, and I respect you. I just want you to enjoy yourself while you're here. So Mark says, "So I tell you what. So what are you doing Monday night?" He goes, "I don't know, nothing, I guess." He said, "Well, I'll tell you what." And Mark had his skybox there. He said that he told this guy, he said, "You get yourself 15 or 20 friends of yours, and go down there. You can have my skybox for the evening." Wow. So they got a group of people, went down there, and he had his box, for the game of that night. So, and that was very typical of the way things, Mark would do things. Just out of the clean. He was real big going to the hospitals in Chicago, the children's wards. He did that quite a bit. He did it in Toronto there a couple times too, I believe. Went to the children's, I don't know what the hospitals were, but some children's wards that he went to, and that was just Mark. That was just Mark.
I tell you something, John, we can't thank you enough for sharing these stories and joining us here. Just great to hear such wonderful things about somebody that, we've known about as a pitcher, but a lot of us never really got a chance to know him on a personal level. And, I got in, and I feel very good that I'm in that little circle. Hopefully one day we can see, you tell Mark what a great time you had on the show, and you thought it was amazing. And you think that, if there's a guy that's going to treat him with the respect, it would be this show.
Right?
Yeah, I know that. And he's going to come back and say, "How much did Barry pay you to say that?"
Does he know that you're on the show? Does he know that we're having you on the show?
No, actually, he's on the road down in Mississippi right now.
Wow, what a lot of fun that was. That is John Buehrle, Mark Buehrle's dad. And I'll tell you what, Tom, even though he talks a lot more than his son, and he's willing to open up a lot more than his son, there are so many similarities between John Buehrle and Mark Buehrle. And I'm not giving up. And John said, "Don't give up. We'll get him. We'll get somehow." And he actually, as John Buehrle said, he did an interview with Frank Thomas.
Yep.
And now that he's done one, and we're in that group, Tom, I'm holding out hope.
Fingers crossed, right? I hear he's a great interview, too. He never shakes off a question.
Oh! Very nice. Very nice. So a big thank you once again to John Buehrle. Thanks to Raj Suppiah. Thanks to Derek Marques. My goodness, so many people to thank. And, of course, one more reminder for you before we go. Manscaped.com. Here's the box again if you're watching. Go to the website, manscaped.com. Order your Lawnmower 4.0. Great Father's Day gift. Type in the promo code. Out of the Park, you'll save 20% and get free shipping. Can't do better than that. Well, Thomas, one thing that I decided that I will never quit is my desire to look my best. So I'm going to go shave right now. And if you hear a scream, that's probably me. No, it won't be because I'm using this. No
screaming necessary, folks.
You'll be fine.
Well, yeah. Anyway, if you see me with a shaved head next time, you know that I did something wrong. Tom, as always, thank you so much, and thanks to all of you for making us a part of your week.